The great flood. It was night and her mother was running. He was on her back. She was running at a steady pace when she tripped from a fallen tree. Both of them rolled down the muddy hill, and his mother fell to a deep pit. He was thrown near it. His young mind didn't know what to do and he could only hear his mother's faint voice down below. It was the end of winter and ice from the mountains were starting to melt. He called upon his mother whose body fell to a sharp wood piercing her shoulders. She was in pain. She called upon him to leave, to run away, and leave her alone. However, he stayed with his mother. All he could hear from her was her fading voice telling him the same thing as time passed. He was crying and crying for hours until he fell asleep. Time passed and it was becoming colder. He was awakened by his mother's faint voice telling him the same thing. His eyes were dried with 1,000 tears and it was so quiet, until he heard rumbling sounds from afar that went louder and louder. He stood up and looked around and far from his sight he saw trees bending down followed by loud splashes. He saw raging water flowing down the hills, approaching them at such speed and size. He didn't know what to do as he called up to his mother. This time, his mother, though in great pain, shouted as loud as she could. "Run, Leonardo, run. Leave me my son, please, run." His young mind could not fathom what was happening around. "Run, Leonardo, run." Her voice was hoarse but powerful and it awakened him. He turned his back, eyes wet from tears, and saw that the water would be near him in a matter of time. It was raging so fast and sounded like 1,000 feet marching towards him. "Run, Leonardo, run. Leave me my son, run." His instincts were stirred by his mother's plea and at one leap he ran as fast as he could, as fast as his feet could carry him, away from his mother who he was still hearing her voice. His eyes began to tear with confusion and fear and his feet were not stopping to escape the flood that had caught up with him. He was swept away and he didn't know where he was going. He held onto a branch of a tree that was floating and tried to keep himself afloat. Everything was so fast. His eyes were seeing lots of things as the water carried him far. It was as if it was the longest days of his life. He could no longer hear his mother.